When we consider doing research with and for children, very often we make considerations at the level of how we can collect data with the children. But what happens once we have collected the data and gained our insights? Do we then stop working with children? So my considerations are situated at the level of science dissemination. Do we only spread our findings amongst our peers at conferences, in journals? I would like to take you with me on a journey on considering public science dissemination with and for children. When I talk about public science dissemination, I will just start by giving you a definition so that we know what we're talking about and what this presentation is all about. And I will rely on the following definition, which I will unravel together with you. First of all, you may notice on the first line of this presentation, there are quite a few verbs involved. Yes, indeed, science dissemination is doing, it's acting. It's not just once you have the findings that you can communicate it. No, it's a matter of translating these insights. It's a matter of curating these and transferring them to the members of the public. So I will talk about these acts of translations, these acts of curation, and consider how we did that in the ySKILLS projects. Then on the third line, you see via science intermediaries. Very often, public science dissemination is happening by people who are in between the academia, the realm of academia on the one hand, and society on the other hand. Examples of science intermediaries can be, for instance, in the media, can be journalists, but can also be, and I see a couple of them being present today online and today in the audience, can also be, for instance, media literacy organizations or youth organizations that actually act in between these academic partners and the public. And then on the fourth line, we're talking about reaching out to the members of the public. It means that we're not only going back to the participants of our study, these are also amongst the people in the public, but we even go beyond those who have participated in our study and also try to reach other people who did even not or never participated in this research. And then lastly, we look at the two last lines here in this definition, and there I would like to emphasize words like active and use. Public science dissemination, at least in the way we conceived it in our project, was not something that we pushed to a passive audience. No, we really wanted to reach out to them, engage them, establishing a dialogue, trying to reach out to young people in a way that they could actively make sense of it, engage with these findings, enrich them with their own findings and meanings, but also that they could use it, for instance, to strengthen their own digital skills, or to help us thinking how we can formulate recommendations, meaning what needs to be done based on these findings. So, by unraveling this definition, I hope I'm setting the scene for you to understand what we aimed for with the ySKILLS public science dissemination efforts. In sum, by taking you through the journey, I will focus on three main questions, because we had a lot of questions when we were trying to do so. Lots of the questions were considerations linked to the what's. Very often this came and was linked to considerations in terms of the how, and then finally I will reflect on the why questions. In terms of the what question, so when we think about content, so what kind of knowledge we wanted to share with our audience, I want to take you, it's kind of a flashback to summer 22, I think it must have been, at the moment where we were in the project. I think it was 3 years of evidence that we collected at that point. And we had lots of deliverables, as it is called in the scientific jargon. We had lots of insights written into reports. And at that moment, in that summer, there was also a synthesis report being written, which collected all the evidence that we had collected so far. And so we thought there was still 1 year ahead of us. And we thought this is a good moment to start thinking about the public science dissemination, because we have already quite a bunch of evidence, and we don't have to wait for the last final moment of the project to think about this public science dissemination. So we had that synthesis, but then came a lot of questions. So we have a synthesis with all the findings, but how to reach out to the audience? Is it child-friendly already? So lots of discussions in workshops, consortium meetings, online calls, Teams, Zooms, whatever. And very soon we realized that whatever we decided in terms of key insights and key content was always linked to considerations in terms of form. How could we present this to, for instance, the young children? How could we consult their feedback and get their voices? But we cannot just get this report to them and then ask them about it. So it should already be in a more child-friendly format. And that's why this full picture has to be shown. Because this full picture shows eventually what we did, but also how we arrived at that moment. What we aimed for eventually was the creation of what we called a participatory toolkit. And the toolkit consisted of two components. On the one hand, there was this more child-friendly summary of these insights that we had, which we brought together in a PowerPoint presentation. Not a fancy, expensive tool that would not be accessible. No, we wanted something that is for a broad public available that can be taken up. And this PowerPoint tool consisted of also interactive elements, so that it would engage young people, for instance, by answering quizzes, by questions, tests, seeing quotes, and so on. And we realized that if we want this to be taken up by a broad audience, we also have to think about these science intermediaries. So we also considered like educators, for instance, schools or media literacy organizations, and we envisioned how they could potentially use it. And that's why we also crafted a protocol for them. It's like instructions in terms of goals that you can reach, the materials that you need, the protocol, the flow that you have to follow in order to bring this across. So hence, when we talk about the toolkits, it's a PowerPoint and a behind-the-scenes protocol that people can use, the people who are the facilitators of that. Now, it speaks for itself that we could not create this just at once. This was really an iterative process where we first had like, a PowerPoint which was not that graphically fancy, but yet it was a kind of good prototype, so to say, that we could reach it out. So we've tested this. We did some pilot tests in Belgium. In the UK, they also tested some of the modules and the dynamics that we eventually used in this toolkit. So we pilot tested it as soon as we had a version that we thought is ready. We reached out to schools, and then we were grateful that people in the consortium who run the studies in survey countries were willing to also test it out in different contexts in their own countries. So they made translations of these PowerPoints. And so that's how eventually it grew. It got optimized. We got feedback from the schools, from the teachers, from the researchers, from the children. We got it more graphically improved. And so through this iterative process, we got it up to the point where it is today. And it is one, remember the definition, that now can be actively used not only in these and by these children, but also by these intermediaries who can appropriate it. It has modules, it's not prescriptive. You can pick out a few modules if you want. You can appropriate it, choose, adjust it to your context. For instance, one of those contexts in which we tried it out was in the Child University. And so we saw that it has that openness still, it has that guidance, but it's not prescriptive either. Eventually, it's now publicly and for free available on the resources page of our website. currently in 5 languages. There might be more to follow, which we hope. But we do not wait for people to find it on an academic website. We proactively are reaching out to local stakeholders. And we also invite people here in the audience, if you are one of those stakeholders and we haven't contacted you yet or it hasn't reached you yet, feel free to reach out to us because you can copy either the link or the full package on your own websites, and this way we are helping each other out so that it gets to the right publics that would benefit from it. So this is definitely an open invitation and continued work. Why did we all do this? And this brings me to the reasons, but also, you might say, a legitimation of the activities that we pursued. First of all, maybe on a small scale, I started by saying when we involve children in our research, it's just an ethical principle to debrief them, just like it's a good ethical principle when you inform people about the goals of your research. It's also a good ethical principle to debrief the people who participated in your research. So that's why lots of the co-design gems were being held in the schools that also participated in the research in the survey countries. So there are ethical reasons why we pursue this. Then secondly, we know that when it comes to design creations, it's always a good idea to design things with and for the people that you envisioned. So that's why a participatory design logic was also pursued in this project. Because it also has some benefits when you reach out to people. You might not only get a better toolkit in our case, but it also is achieved in a process that actually people can learn from it. And for us, this mutual learning was really important because throughout the process, we wanted to learn from these children, see how they could resonate with these findings, how they made sense of it, whether they find it bullshit or not, whether our examples were well chosen within their lived worlds, whether they really found it enriching or not. And from a participatory design logic, we also see that researchers who adhere to participatory design have started to focus more and more of not only fostering a participatory design during a project, but also already during the project think and anticipate on what might come next and build a kind of infrastructure of how we can continuously reach out and provide these opportunities. And for us, this was also important that we could not only present the toolkit today, but that it would also, and that we do our best and the efforts that we can, that it can also be embedded in the network of our science intermediaries, of our youth networks, that it can be used also after the project ends. So this day today is a tipping point for that ambition as well. Whereas the first and the second principle are mainly working with children who already participated in the project, the third one is definitely reaching out also beyond the people who were already working with us in the project. So hence this act of public science dissemination, which we did not conceive as a one-way communication approach, but a two-way communication approach, and hence the aspect of open-endedness and the active invitations for children to engage with these materials as well. And then last but not least, and I think I will also make a bridge to what happened later, what's happening later today in the program. There is also good reasons from a child rights perspective to do so, because children's voices should be heard in matters that eventually affect them. By engaging with these materials, they get to know about digital skills that eventually might also strengthen their own resilience, or directly or indirectly their digital well-being. And anyway, it's important to embed in design what's for best interest to these young people. So this is a more transversal line that's in many of the activities that we have done in the ySKILLS project resonated and was strongly present, just like it was in our project. So I've brought you in 10, 15 minutes through a very, a year-long trajectory, so to say. You see, at the end, I explained what drove us. And I must say, I started by saying how we did so. And I admit that even though our intentions were all very idealistic, when we really tried to put it into practice, we were confronted with so many questions, also many constraints that we couldn't do as we hoped to do. So I don't want to show you like the perfect picture, because when you do the dirty work in research, it's like when you read about a method how to do in a handbook, it looks very shiny, but when you do it in practice, there are so many questions. The same goes for public science dissemination. So I hope by giving this as an inspiration to you, sharing your best practices, that you can learn from it. I'm sure when you implement it, you will have new questions or new challenges, but that's okay, I think. For me, I would like to use this opportunity to thank the consortium, because you helped us thinking along this trajectory. You shared your best practices already. You helped us to spot accessibility problems in the PowerPoint or things that might not work for diversity perspective reasons. So we all took it up to the best we could, but we're open still to feedback in the case that we can also learn from your best practices. So definitely an open invitation, and I thank you for having listened to this presentation.